It was a Red River blowout. Final score, Texas 34, Oklahoma 3. What did we learn from this one? I don't know there's a ton to take away here if you're talking about, overall, what is Oklahoma long-term, what is Texas long-term, but I do think maybe there's a couple of footnotes that are worth us unpacking together as it pertains to both of these outfits. So we'll unpack it right now. Make sure you are subscribed, whether you're a Texas fan, whether you're an Oklahoma fan. Want you dialed in here, whether you're a college football fan, make sure you're subscribed. Also follow me on the social platforms, Twitter and Instagram at JD Piquel. Let me know your takeaways from yesterday's action in Red River. Going into the game, the big storyline was what? The chess match between Brent Venables and his defense and Steve Sarkisian and how he's calling the Texas offense. Sort of these two of the best in the sport going at it. And early on, things were a little bit weird, right? You saw Quinn Ewers look out of sorts. There's that early turnover, and you're like, okay, is this how this thing is going to go? Is Brent Venables about to just dial up another defensive masterpiece, and they end up finding a way to get it done in Red River against a double-digit point spread? And then what I think you saw Texas do was just sort of sit back and say, you know what? We're just going to keep it simple. We're going to run the football. And that's not to say that Steve Sarkisian didn't have some schematic things he baked into that game plan to equip them to run the football effectively. But at the end of the day, man, you run the football for right around 6 yards a carry. Yeah, you're pounding the rock. You are more physical than your opponent, and that's how you get down on that day. And that's, I think, what we saw, because Quinn Ewers, again, you saw him a little bit rusty. You saw the interception, and I don't think it was a thing where Steve Sarkisian said, we can't throw the football. But it was a situation where it's like, if we can run the ball, why are we messing around with trying to push the ball vertical? Why are we trying to do all X, Y, and Z thing downfield? And I think the style switch from Texas, and this is not me saying that Texas didn't somehow want to run the football, because obviously they do. I mean, that's definitely a part of their DNA. There's no mistaking that. But to be able to style switch against a top 10 defense and to double down on running the football and to do what they did in the run game, that, I think, is noteworthy, because how many times have we said on this show, hey, in the 12-team playoff era, honestly, even in the 4-team playoff era, it's about what styles of games you can win. And Texas probably had a couple of styles they could have played to win this football game, quite frankly. I think the final score indicates that with how well their defense played and what Oklahoma's offense is lacking. But to be able to have that in the back pocket and say, you know what, if we don't have the pass game all the way ramped up, Quinn Ewers coming off injury, if we're not at where we want to be offensively downfield, we can just go to our stable of backs. We can just rely on the experience of this offensive line and impose our will that way and win the football game. That means something, okay? That is something, again, to file away if you're a Texas fan and say, because I understand Oklahoma offensively, they have their issues. We'll talk about that in a second. That's a good defense. Don't let that final box score fool you. 34 points against what I believe to be a top 10 defense in all of college football. That's an accomplishment. All right, that is something that I think will serve Texas well the rest of the way if they're able to duplicate that kind of play style going forward here. The other thing I can't help but feel as I watch this game is like, well, man, what happens when Quinn Ewers gets back dialed in? What happens when Quinn Ewers actually is back to what he usually looks like? Because, say what you want. Quinn Ewers going for less than 200 yards yesterday, $199 to be exact, and the bad interception, missed on a couple throws downfield. When Quinn Ewers is back dialed in and you have that run game, how scary is Texas? And I get it. We'll get to see them against Georgia next week, and that's going to be an absolute movie. But I'm just saying, long term, if Texas can run the football like that and then have Quinn Ewers back to Quinn Ewers' style, good luck stopping Texas, because that defense was ferocious. Now, I don't know how much stock you want to put into the defense based on what Oklahoma doesn't have offensively right now, but I think all you say if you are watching that Texas defense, real good. Real good. Flying around. Got after a true freshman quarterback. A true freshman quarterback also that can hurt you with his legs. They did not allow that to happen. If you're Texas, you just say, okay, check the box, cool, move forward. Now for Oklahoma, again, we talk about the offense, and I don't know how much you really want to unpack here. Offensively, it was just a classic no-win situation here for Michael Hawkins Jr. Because the entire wide receiving core is dinged up, it feels like. And the offensive line has got their own issues. And if they didn't have their own issues, they already have a tough situation against that Texas front seven who's really freaking good. Like, there was just, it's tough to really get a great eval for what Oklahoma is offensively right now. There was a thought for me, at least, as we went into the second half of that game, like, hey, you're trailing. The offense needs a spark. They talked about it on the broadcast, too. Like, does Jackson Arnold need to maybe see some reps here? Not saying Michael Hawkins Jr. isn't your guy long-term here when it comes to the rest of your season, but, like, just the offense never really was able to get off the ground. And I think everyone's going to point to Michael Hawkins Jr. and it's like, dude, he's a freshman. This is college football. That's the number one team in America, in Texas. Like, as much as you want to say, hey, Michael Hawkins Jr., we need more from you, I don't know how helpful of an exercise that really is. Because, again, with what you have up front and with what you don't have on the perimeter, Michael Hawkins Jr. can only do so much. Speaking of only doing so much, like, you allow 34 points, I don't know if I feel any differently about the defense than I did going into that football game. Going in, I was like, one of the best in America, really talented, really exotic, going to try and be confusing and apply pressure. Like, I still think that's who they are coming out of this thing. Just because you allowed 34 points, I don't think differently about them, quite frankly. And a lot of that is because of what you don't have offensively. Like, it's tough to play complementary football when the offense is essentially giving you, if not 3 and out, darn near close to it every single series. Like, you're out there for quite a bit of time, I guess is what I'm trying to say there if you're Oklahoma. So I think when we zoom out here, the conversation for Oklahoma fans or for maybe people that are more radical when it comes to their conversation around college football head coaches, they're going to say, well, is Brent Venables the right guy for the job? They're going to say that, well, because, hey, Jackson Arnold didn't work out. Hey, you just got pummeled by your rival. Like, what's up here? And I think we'd be wise to not be victims of the moment when it comes to assessing Brent Venables and the situation they're in right now. One, that's their second loss. Okay, so they've lost to a Tennessee team that was ranked very high when they lost to them, and a Texas team that's number 1 in America. People are going to say, well, why don't you have the quarterback situation figured out? Y'all, they did have the quarterback situation figured out. They had a 5-star quarterback that was ready to roll. However, you couldn't protect him. Okay, and I get it's maybe not that simplistic. Jackson Arnold absolutely has his own issues, absolutely has to take better care of the football. Maybe he's still the guy. But I'm telling you, like, you don't have the proper pieces offensively right now to be successful. Brent Venables is a defensive guy. This is going to sound a little bit bizarre, but it's almost the inverse of the situation you have with Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley, the offense is great. Defense is just can't get anything going. Offensively, that's kind of where Brent Venables is right now. That wasn't the case last year, though, with Dylan Gabriel. So what I'm trying to say here is we knew going into the year this was an operation that hinged quite a bit on what they had up front. And right now up front, we are seeing consistently they do not have an offensive line to get them to where they need to go in the SEC. And then you add insult to injury quite literally, or injury to insult, I suppose, quite literally with what you don't have on the perimeter because all those guys are dinged up. Like Deion Burks is a stud. Didn't get to play at all yesterday. Okay, so just the pieces right now are just not harmonious, which is unfortunate, but it's just the reality. So what, does that mean Brent Venables is a bad coach? Because they're breaking in a whole new offensive line? No, this stuff happens. This stuff happens, and when it happens, when you move into the SEC, like, those issues become magnified. So all I'm trying to say here is, like, I don't think the conversation around is Brent Venables the right guy is really fair at this point. Last year, you won 10 football games, okay? Like, are you sure after 1 year where you underachieve relative to expectations, first year in the SEC, that's the book on Brent Venables? Doesn't feel like it to me. All right, now going back to Texas, one more thing I'll say. This was a game to me, I said all week, big point spread, rivalry game, neutral site, a lot of passion, a lot of energy. Things probably will get weird. And then they didn't. Like, they were weird for maybe the first half a little bit, but they ultimately finished out pretty dramaless, if you will. Great teams have a certain way of not processing the moment correctly, and I mean that in a positive way. Like, when I was in college, we had a kicker by the name of Nick Knoll. Nick Knoll, if you're watching, you're a dog. He was a psychopath. Like, it did not matter if he was kicking a extra point in practice or it was a 40-plus yarder to win the football game. he approached every single kick the exact same way. And I don't know if it was like a thing where he just did that intentionally. I don't know if just upstairs he had something going on to where he didn't realize the magnitude of the situation. Like Texas, I think they realized the magnitude of the situation, but they approached it just like they have every other game. And so what I'm trying to say here is I think Texas has got that championship sort of mentality that we already knew they had. I think we saw it against Michigan. I think we've seen it in other games throughout the course of this season against lesser competition. But to see it in Red River, that to me is just further validation of who Texas is. And Texas is, just so we're on the same page, a national title contending team. Not a, oh, they'll be in the dance. Not a, oh, maybe they'll make that, that field of 12 and win a couple games. Like Texas, by nature of their ranking, we already know this, but just to reiterate here, Texas is a national title caliber team. All right? Looking forward to hearing y'all's thoughts. Subscribe to the channel. Get at me on the socials. All right? We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.